Hello and welcome everyone. This is going to be a quick announcement before we get started with the video. We have a current promotion going on. If you join our Discord link, you'll get free access for a complete week. No gimmicks, no signups necessary. It's completely free. You'll also get a 12-hour tape reading course sent to you via DM. So don't miss out. Link is going to be in the description. This is a limited time deal only. So don't miss out. If you've been looking at joining the tape reading chat room or learning more about tape reading, it's a great opportunity without any cost.
This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome to this edition of Traders Exchange. As always, everything that we're going to be talking about today is for educational purposes only, and nothing is intended as any type of investment advice. So we know it's been a slow summer. I mean, we're coming into a presidential election. I mean, student loan repayment is coming back. There's a ton of stuff that's going on out there. So one of the things that I do, I used to play Sudoku a lot. As I sat down here and I was scanning, I would play Sudoku, but I kind of went back to one of my favorite games of all time, and it's chess. So I kind of, in a certain way, kind of had an epiphany yesterday. Most people that create the stock market, are they visionaries? Or are they taking something, and I want to say, because there are visionaries that come in, algos and stuff like that, but more along the lines of the people that really succeed, how do they look at the stock market? And believe me, I'm going to tie chess into everything that we're going to be talking about, but how do they really look at the stock market? Do they look at it as somebody that is a painter or part of the arts, or do they look at it more so the art of war? Sun Tzu. It's an art form, but really what does it come down to? And if you haven't read The Art of War, it is such an easy read. You're crazy. But what does it really come down to? We just had our classes based off of this. Oh, it's one of my favorite. Comes down to strategy. Everything that we do and the people that end up controlling everything, it comes down to strategy. Look at any part of the world. And I mean, not for nothing, but does the stock market not have a huge influence within the entire world? So when we go back to when the stock market first started, what's a game that most people played? Because back then you didn't have internet, you didn't have Netflix, you didn't have anything that you could really go into. So what was a game that was created way before that had everything to do with strategy? And obviously, I have a chessboard showing, and for legal purposes, I have to use the stock photo, but but overall, it's strategy. So something happened to me yesterday, and it was just I had to do this Traders Exchange on it just because of the fact that there's a Netflix show on it, so everyone knows. But has anyone ever heard of the Queen's Gambit? So I don't know if everyone plays chess here, but I mean, that's something that I've focused on for a long, long time. I love chess just because of the fact that you have to understand the next person's move before you make your move. Because if you choose the wrong strategy, their strategy is going to completely destroy you. So I don't play chess regularly. I play time chess. Okay, it's called speed chess. So each one of us has 5 minutes in total to either win, or what happens if both of us don't win. If neither of us wins, does anyone know what happens? So, yeah, it's a draw. So it used to be one of the most popular openings, but why do you think it's not anymore? So I'm not gonna. My goal here is I want you guys to expand your thinking. Understanding 1 through 4 trades is not hard, but understanding strategy is really what it comes into. And then from that, it comes into emotion, which we're going to get into. Probably because everyone learned it and how to count. Exactly, Eric. It used to be, but it is not anymore because of the fact there's a ton of different strategies that can be used against it. Does anyone know what the Queen's Gambit, the purpose of it is? Because a strategy without purpose means nothing. What's the purpose of the Queen's Gambit? And you don't need to know anything about chess to be honest right now. I'm going to take this back to trading, but I need to kind of put this out there first for us to really understand. But what's the purpose of the Queen's Gambit? So for those of you that don't know, it's to control the center of the board. Not sure what the move is, but if it's opening move, I'd guess it'd be a quick way to get them into checkmate. Okay, so it is. So yesterday I won this was the first time. One of the worst things that I could possibly do, and this is how we're going to bring it back into trading. One of the worst things I could possibly do is play somebody that has no idea how to play chess. You know why? Because they have no strategy. And it's just like when I look at a stock that I can't understand, it's just because it's random. So if I try to play chess with my daughter and she just moves pieces just to move them because that's how they can move, I'm not sure what strategy to use. It happens with us all the time. Now, don't get me wrong, I'll figure out a way to end up being able to win, but it's random. I can't control random. I don't understand random, and it's almost impossible to actually be able to trade that or play somebody in chess. But something happened yesterday, and it was the quickest I've ever won, and it probably would have taken about 45 seconds. Besides the fact that after their move, it was almost like they watched a YouTube video, and after that YouTube video, when it didn't work, they had no idea what to do. So what the Queen's Gambit actually is, okay, it's the Queen's pawn. So white always moves first, okay, and the Queen's pawn will move 2 moves up. So the Queen's pawn's there. Now, the real counter to this, and there's no counter yet because you don't actually know what's happening, but the only counter to move, because you don't want to give up your pieces unless it's time to give up your pieces. The next move is for black to come right here. So the next move, and like I said, sometimes you have to give up something, is to move right here. Now, if you don't know anything about chess, pawns can move forward 2 spots on the first move. After that, they can only move once, but they can take diagonal. So after I move this up, what is human nature going to tell me to do? I hate that I can't see this. What is human nature for this pawn right here to do? Attack. So it takes my pawn. Now I move my second pawn right here, and I control the center of the board. That's the real move. That's the real reason. Now, at the same time, if they, once we move up there, then if they start moving on the outsides, then I got to bring my knights up and so on and so forth. But again, you don't need to really understand chess to understand this. But I saw exactly what they did. I was black, they were white. White has an advantage because they get to move first. They get to make the first opening attack. And the second I saw that, I was in their head. So what do you think I did mentally? Forget about chess, but mentally, what do you think I did when I saw this person specifically was using the Queen's Gambit? And I don't need a chess move. I don't need anything else. But what do you think I specifically did? I baited them. I let them think that that they were controlling the center of the board, and I came up with a complete different strategy because I knew exactly what they were doing. And this is when it comes down to trading. It's the same thing. I see this in the elite group when I watch the recordings all the time. And sometimes we try to understand everything that's happening. But from these last classes, one of the things that I hope that you guys understand is that sometimes we don't know exactly what the other person is doing. And when we don't have to trade it. When you're playing chess, you have to make a move, especially when it's speed chess. You have to make a move. But in trading, we don't have to do that. We can wait until we see the Queen's Gambit coming out and take that specific trade. When we have to talk about a trade for an extended period of time, that means there was a lot that went on within it. But there's tons of trades that are constantly happening every single day that we don't have to do that. Now, if that person would have played, they let their time run out before they made the move. It would have taken me 45 seconds to beat them because I knew exactly who they were. In their head, I knew they watched a YouTube video on the Queen's Gambit. And the reason that I love this too is because there's a Netflix show on it. But most people have no idea what the actual strategy of the Queen's Gambit is. And now we bring it back to trading. Do we understand every strategy that they use? And sometimes they hide it so well. There's stocks that we're going to look at, and you know what? In hindsight, we could make up a reason, but in that time period that we're actually looking at it, do we have any idea what they're actually doing? They're hiding, ask and bid prints in between. They're hiding. And those are the hardest part. It's just like when I play my daughter in chess and she just moves pieces in random spots. Those are the hardest games I have, is because I have to focus so hard on how to corner her and do all these different things because there's no real strategy behind it. And when there's no real strategy behind something, who are they in terms of trading? They're retail. Now, the difference between chess with my daughter and the retail is we know their strategy. What's the number one strategy all retail uses? Day in, day out, will never change. It's the first thing everyone's ever always taught: buy low and sell high. Well, I mean, that's a great strategy, but yeah, it's support and resistance. So we're actually a leg above because people don't do things in random when they're older. My daughter does it because she doesn't care what the result is. But everyone that's actually out there trading, do they care? Are they there to just play around, or are they there to make money? Unfortunately, they'll probably never make money, but That's what they're actually there for. Now, I want to use chess a little bit more in going into what we're talking about. How many of you have made revenge trades? Chess is such a concentration of discipline and strategy. So certain moves actually tell us exactly what the person is going to do. Does everyone know what a queen does in chess? By far, your queen is your best moving chess piece. So what a queen can do is anything. Queen can go all the way sideways if they want to. They can go straight down. There's no real rules. Now, obviously, it can't go to the right then down, but it can go vertical like this. It could go horizontal, or it could go diagonal, and it can move as many spots as it wants to. Do we want to lose the queen when we're playing chess? No, of course not. But what's more important, the queen or the king? Why is the king more important? It's called checkmate. If you take the king, game's over. You lose. So I want you to think about something that a lot of people that play chess don't think about. The reaction to the queen being taken, how much can that tell you about a person's strategy? Because there's really two ways to go about it. We don't want to lose our queen, but when we lose our queen, we have a few options to think about. We can revenge the queen, but what does that do to the king? Yeah, extremely vulnerable. So now our king is vulnerable because we're revenging the queen for them taking the queen. Is that one of the better strategies to have? Of course, each match is going to, be a little bit different, but in theory, no, it's not whatsoever. Because revenging the queen is the same thing as holding a trade. It's a panic move, emotionally based, and that's exactly what it is. Because we could go avenge the queen, but we're going to let the kingdom die. What sense does that actually make? But I want you to think about, for a second, your account. Okay? If your account goes to zero, what happens? It's checkmate. So the queen is really just a trade within what we're looking at. And how many of us go to avenge the queen to allow the king to be vulnerable? Because every day the market is playing the queen's gambit. They're controlling the center of the board. So we have to have strategy going into it and not just try to put random pieces. I'm going to tell you, my daughter's never won once. One day she's going to beat my butt because she's smarter than I am. Okay, but at the same time, that's what the market does, is the Queen's Gambit every single day. So if we don't have a strategy that we're specifically looking for to use, we're never going to be able to win in 45 seconds. Call me the first night. But it's a panic move. So you got to think, the Queen gives you the ability to do anything. That's trading. The King is your account. The King always has to be protected. So why do we avenge the Queen so often? Because I'm going to tell you right now, if you think about your own trading, your own account, if you stopped trying to avenge the Queen, would your account be better off or worse? And I'd be rich. It shows this. So everything is about strategy. When we did our classes, there's certain things that we want to look for. Number one trade, we want to see it go up on nothing, give a catalyst of ask print. That's a great number one trade. When we traded BABA, okay, everything said we couldn't have a number one trade, but we get caught up in just the foundation. Because I want you to think about something. So let's erase all of this stuff that's going on here. Okay, so the Queen's Gambit again, right? So the Queen's pawn moves to d4. What if instead they don't move this pawn, but they move to h5? Am I going to win in 45 seconds? Not even close. Because now I have they're giving me the center of the board, but they're coming down the sides. Now I have to have a completely different strategy. But the difference between chess and trading is, do I have to be involved if it's going to be harder? I don't. So when I see this move go on, you know what I do? I look for a new stock. Unless I can tell exactly who that person is within their trading or exactly what they're going to do, I don't have to trade it. And I also have to understand what common things look like. Okay. Netflix show comes out, The Queen's Gambit. How many people do you think in chess try to open up with that strategy? Now, all beginners, all the beginners, because they look at what, the openings look like, and when you Google openings in chess, what do you think one of the first things is going to be? Well, so Dave, if they're not seasoned, of course, but most people are playing chess as a hobby. They're not playing it, really looking to it the way that we need to look at it. And what does that correlate to? What does that sound like? That sounds like most people that are trading out there. You want to just go and sit by your computer and just make money that day. That's not how this works. And that's the people that play chess are almost on that same page. They want to play chess, but are they trying to be a grandmaster? And anyone that doesn't know what a grandmaster is, I mean, these are like the best minds, and it's just unbelievable how good they are. I mean, almost to the point where you think their brains are AI. But when we start, we look for a strategy. And when the strategy doesn't fit, we don't have to trade it. And again, going back to this round of classes, everything needs to be a strategy. And one of the greatest parts about trading is one of your strategies going to show up no matter what each day. Even during these are the biggest vacation weeks of the entire year. Okay, until after Labor Day, we're gonna have really bad volume. We understand that. But are there still going to be strategies that are going to show up that give us huge high percentage trades every single day? Now, not for nothing, but what we went over in class, was it not 100%? So there's trades out there. If I can be 100%, then so can everyone else. There weren't a lot of trades. After one trade, it gets slowed down, but we have to start thinking in a strategic mindset. Like you said, The Art of War, that's one of my favorite books ever. I mean, I've highlighted it, sentences in multiple different highlighter colors. I remember when I went to visit my dad at the hospital, I reread it again. It's just because there's certain things that don't change. And if you ever notice the books that get put out by Doug or Dave or anything, there's a certain way that filthy rich people think. And it doesn't differentiate. Though that thought process is in the minds of everybody that controls what goes on. So all we have to do, we can either read about it. That's why if anyone ever knows, I've never suggested a stock book to you on how to learn how to trade. But psychology, number one thing to look at, and mindset. Because when we understand the mindset of what someone's going to do, I want you to think about it for a second. Imagine you're going into war. And chess is kind of a war game. But you're going into war, and someone from the other side comes and brings you their exact game plan. Should you lose? Of course not. Because if you know exactly what somebody's going to do, you have to set your game plan up for it. And that's where the anticipation comes from. That's where being ahead of the charts comes from. But we should be able, if we know what's going to happen. But there's going to be sometimes we have no idea. And when we have no idea, does it fit our game plan? Of course not. So we have to stop trying to understand every stock and why it moves that way. Now, don't get me wrong. At the end of the day, I still try to do that. But that's not how I trade. And that's the difference between being consistent and some days being good, some days being bad. I want to understand every stock and why it moves. But in reality, is that possible? Can I understand why every stock moves based off of what the SEC allows them to do with prints? It's impossible. But what I can do is I can sit there and wait for the Queen's Gambit or wait for the perfect number one trade or the number two trade. So I go into each day with a strategy. It's not a stock is moving. Let me get into it. For instance, SE today. SE was not an easy trade. there was a lot of variables that went in that if you didn't put them all together, you would have been kind of stuck. But it moved $5.49. So that wasn't the perfect trade. My strategy, I didn't have a strategy in it. That was me trying to understand everything that was happening. Now, if this was 10 years ago, do you think I would have been successful here? Probably not. Maybe I would have got lucky and just, kind of clicked short and went, but I couldn't calculate it. I didn't know exactly what the person on the other side is. And it goes back to the same thing. So when you take someone's queen, how do they react? Do they push forward and try and give up the king to try to get revenge? Or do they sit back, protect the king, and get their revenge afterwards? Which player would I rather play? The one that takes revenge or the one that sits back with a strategy to plot revenge? Who's more dangerous? Of course, the person that's sitting there thinking. So what's better to trade? The person that says, here it is, I'm going for it, or the person that is sitting back and hiding everything? Who's the one I'm more afraid of? Because just like chess and the Queen's Gambit, and I know I keep saying that, again, bringing it back to chess, but at the end of the day, the one that's plotting, I don't want to be involved, because if they're plotting, who do they have to take down? Yeah, they got to take my shares in order to really get their game plan. But the one that says, here it is, guess what? That's where our high percentages actually come from. And like I said, I've never, it took about 3 minutes. I think it was like 2 minutes and 53 seconds or something like that. Okay, but it could have been 45 seconds, because after they realized I had a strategy for it, they had no idea what to do, because I was in their head. I knew they went on Google and they looked up the Queen's Gambit, and that was their opening. And then after that, they had no game plan after. But I already had a game plan for exactly what they were going to do, and that changed everything. And it really it sunk in, because that's what I do with my trading. That's why I can be consistent, is because I don't do anything until I see a game plan. Once I'm in their head and I know exactly what they need to do, because I use the word need. It's not what they want to do. Because if it was what they want to do, then they're a retail trader too. Why do you think I say the word need? They need. What happens to those people when they're not successful? I don't know if any of you have ever been in a $20 million trade, but why do they need it to work? Because you're not going to be there anymore. It needs to happen. So once you're in the head of somebody that needs to do something, it changes everything. And it goes back to like what we talked about in SE this morning in the chat, is that, it looked like a ton of covering. Let me just bring it up real quick. It looked like a ton of covering between 44 and 43. But if we look at this day chart right here, how many people are actually short? We don't need a number. We just need to know is on the scale of 1 to 10. Everything I use in my judgment for stocks is 1 to 10. So if we see a move like this and we know that market makers need to be correct, on a scale of 1 to 10, how many people are short? Moves $2.32 a day within its range. On a scale of 1 to 10, how many people do you think are short? I'm okay with 9. I'm okay with 10. But it's up there. Again, 9 and 10, is there going to be any difference between that and the way my thought process needs to go? No. So I would say you're both correct. So when I see that what looks like a huge amount of covering, is it? Even though it's over print personality, there's certain things that trump that. So when I see the strategy here, I have to assume there's a huge amount of people. So I see that covering coming in, and it looks like it's really big, but is it really? No. And that's the difference between thinking that you could take a number 3 trade versus really being in your number 2 trade. Now, again, it was not perfect. The way it came about, you had to get out of a whole bunch. You're in a rider, riding back down. 40 was eventually, but eventually means what? If I'm in the stock from under 44 and 40 is the spot, but it comes underneath 42, I have $1.50 at most. So when volume dies and it starts going into a consolidation, my game plan now, is it worth the exposure? Because I only have 12%. I don't have a ton, but is it worth the exposure? That's how we have to think, our game plan. We have to have a strategy for everything we want. One of the biggest problems that most traders have is that the second that we're up, what do we want to happen? And if you don't want this, you might not be human. But what do you want to happen once you're up? I don't care who you are. You want it to keep going. And especially when you know it has the prints to keep going. But should that affect our strategy? Does that change anything? We all want home runs, but home runs come from doing the correct thing and making sure that we're not blowing up our king. So yeah, could I have held all of it until going to 40? I could have. But is that going to help me tomorrow? Is that extra $1.50 going to help me tomorrow when I do the same thing and then the stock bars up $2? We have a hard time, most of us as traders, psychologically, we have a hard time understanding that little bits add up over a year. So we want to make one trade so much more than what it actually allows us to have. We want to revenge the queen and come back. I'm going to give you a perfect example right now. Anyone ever lose 500 bucks in a trade? And I'm just making up a number, but anyone ever lose $500 in a trade? Of course. Okay. So has anyone ever been down $500 and let it go to 1,000? terrible, isn't it? What if you could take all that back by having the right strategy? So every time that ever happened, that $500 loss that seems like so much, all of a sudden becomes 1,000 now, and then 1,500 now. When would you have wanted to click out of that trade? Well, Trevor, probably at like 100, but 500 sounds great. And this is what devastates people because you have no strategy. You're not you're letting the trade dictate what you're doing rather than having a strategy for everything that's happening. We talk about spots. So if it breaks a spot, it's over. So what changes that forces that well, not forces us, but keeps us into just allowing it to happen? Because I know I didn't teach that. Yeah, but what's greed? Is it going to come back? Is that the thought process? You have no strategy. Going into a trade, our number one thing we have to have is what? Okay, what? Okay. That's what causes us to take a trade. But what's the number one thing that we actually need to have in our game plan in taking a trade? Controlling Prince volume, yes, of course. Those are why we take a trade. But the number one thing that we have to have in our game plan or our strategy of a trade is what? We need to protect our king. A stop loss. A number where that's it. We're out. It hasn't happened often, but there's a few people that I've played on this, and again, I'm not allowed to say what app it is, but if you go to the Google Play Store, it's number one. But either way, if there's a few people that I've went against that are just better than me. Honestly, I don't even know why they're on the app. I mean, I guess maybe honing in on their strategies but our number one thing is when the queen's taken, who do we protect? So the queen is our trade. Are we going to try to revenge the queen? Will I win that chess match? If I try to revenge the queen as my strategy? Not a chance. Tough task. Yeah, guess what? You know what, Steve? I love that. Tough task. Because it can happen every once in a while. But for the amount of times that it happens versus the amount of times it doesn't happen, what do you think's going to go on within your trading career? You're going to fail. If every time I go to revenge the queen, I am going to fail. My rank on this app would be destroyed. But what if I protect the king? I just turned a tough task that's still going to be a tough task into a higher percentage chance. Because at the end of the day, when the king is taken, what happens? Checkmate. It's game over. So even if, I can still play another game tomorrow, but eventually, what's going to happen if I keep letting my king get taken? It's over. Tomorrow, I'm going to lose again. 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 So every once in a while, it's almost like golf. Anyone that plays golf, just recreationally would understand. There's one shot that brings you back. So you hit this one great shot, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to come back. But if you actually remember the 18 holes that you played, you probably shouldn't play anymore. That's for most, retail golfers. Okay, and it's the same thing. That one time that you're able to save the king, you think that you can keep doing it. But what actually is happening is it's almost like a mental fog because it's not real. You cannot continue that way. Your strategy when your queen is taken is to protect the king. Best chess players in the entire world. They will set it up to protect the king. Now, don't get me wrong. They set it up to protect the king beforehand. Isn't it interesting how trading fits right into that? How do we set up protecting the king beforehand? Such an easy answer. It only takes your calculations, but your stop loss. We have to have a number that if it breaks that, that's it. It's over. That chess game, we lost. We have to accept losing. Because if we don't protect the king day in and day out, all of a sudden, just like I told you, what is does everyone know? Actually, you know what? 200, I feel like you guys are going to know. What is $1,000 a day equal? So 250 is over it. 20 trading days in a month, typically. 12 months, 240. 240K. But yes, a quarter mil. So what does $200 each day losing cost you? It's $50,000. Adds up real quick, doesn't it? But when we talk about losing $200 a day, what strategy did we have to protect the king? Because the same strategy that we have to make money affects the king. So we can't go into each day and be like, it's okay for this trade or that trade. If you lose $5,000 in one trade, you know what it takes to come back from that? Our account is the king, the queen is a trade, our management is the strategy. And that's, in a nutshell, the whole purpose of this traders exchange. Your king is the account. Because what happens when the account's gone? Just like what happens when the king is gone in chess. Game over. Checkmate. It's a strong word. I love it. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I haven't played many actual people in chess as of recent, but I used to love taking and just knocking the king down. It's just a power move. I felt good about it. Okay, checkmate. So who do you need to protect with your strategies? And it doesn't mean to wait back and then protect the king. The king needs to be protected before you even make your first move. What's the whole point of the queen's gambit? Let's bring it all the way back around right now. What's the whole point of the queen's gambit? So control the center to protect what? So the king and the queen. Because you can't come through. You have an army in front of you to control the center to stop the ability for them to move. And then we can move our knights, we can move our bishops, and we can attack while the king and queen are sitting comfy in their home. I just want to give you a visual, but they're sitting in their palace and they're sitting back and the army's in front. That's the whole point of the Queen's Gambit. But when did that strategy start? Did we react to save the king and queen? Absolutely not. When did it start? It literally starts with our first move. We're protecting the queen. I can't see this. We're protecting the queen and we're protecting the king in our first move by controlling the center of the board. So when we go into trading, how do we do that? Well, we make calculations. We have the most important part, which is our stop loss. There's a number where the trade is over. We don't hold it thinking it's going to come back because we can make a new trade. We don't do, if we do that, we're reacting. By holding it, you're literally taking out all your pawns. So now everyone on your bottom line is exposed. Your rooks, your knights, your bishops, your king and queen are just exposed. That's what holding a trade does. And I'm going to tell you right now, I bet you every single person here, your biggest loss, was it because the stock barred down on you or is it because you held it? Guaranteed. Now, I have a different story because my biggest loss was because the stock got halted and they were just fake, but for the most part. Or barred and held it. Oh, well, I mean, that's, the perfect combination, and that's terrible. Stocks are going to bar down on you, but if you do things the right way, it's going to take a little bit away, and it's part of the game. But by holding a stock and not having a strategy, you're taking away your pawns. And what's the only thing that really, if you started the game without your pawns, what's protecting you? What's protecting you if you held and you got rid of all your pawns? Nothing. Now you have an entire army that's coming after you, and this army is market makers, okay? And your pawns are gone. Oop, that was meant to happen. Okay, but your pawns are now gone, and now everybody is screwed. Guys, this is what trading is. And like I said yesterday, after this happened, I started thinking about it. And I mean, should you start playing chess? You don't need to, but it's a great game. And it applies so much into trading, just like The Art of War from Sun Tzu is such a great book to understand. It has nothing to do with trading. It has to do with a thought process. And that's what the entire point of this Traders Exchange is a thought process. That I know if I don't protect my king. So it's so funny because you add money into it and things change. If I tell you the most important thing is protecting your king, what are you going to do if I play you in chess? Me and you went head to head in chess. What are you going to do? And you know the most important thing is protecting your king. You're going to protect your king. But how many of you, the most important thing is protecting your king? So I don't want to use the word worry because worry means that worry stops you from doing things that need to be done. So it's not worry, but protect. You're going to protect your king. Exactly, Steve. Focus on it. Perfect. You're going to focus on it. But when I tell, without using this example, when I tell you the most important part of trading is what? What's the most important part of trading? Controlling losses. So why is it any different? Probably because you could just set the chess pieces up again. On my coffee table, I have this beautiful glass chess set. I play myself sometimes, which is, I know it sounds crazy, but it's literally like I try to beat myself with different strategies and just, but it comes down to the same thing as trading, is that I got to protect the king. That's my account. And the only way I can protect the king is by being consistent day in and day out and using my strategies. Because when I play my daughter, I don't know what the hell to do so much of the time. If you go first, do you make the same move all the time to start the game? No, absolutely not. I use different strategies every time. And obviously they come back because there's not a ton of strategies. But I use something different. So I see like how would the Queen's Gambit work off of X? I don't want to get too far into actual chess. I just want you guys to understand how to apply it into here. Like for instance, I mean we're getting into chess now, but the Panzani or whatever it's called, like it's the oldest opening ever. So like I'll put that against the Queen's Gambit, or I'll put this, and then the opening isn't as important as the rest is. Because if somebody doesn't fall into that trap, I have to have a completely different game plan. But it comes down to understanding who do we have to protect. We get in trouble when that $500 loss turns into 1,000 and then 1,500, and we keep letting it go. And it's the same thing, just like, it's a loss, 20 cents. Well, it's only 20 cents. I'm going to give it another 10 cents. But then it gets another 10 cents. I'm going to give it another 10 cents. But who do we have to protect? Our king. So when we protect our king, we do that from the start. It's not a reaction. It's a game plan going into it. We talk about risk versus reward. Risk versus reward is based off protecting the king. So if the king gets a little cut on him, we're good. If I can take that. When it's a huge high percentage, well, the king is just alone in the castle, eating and drinking and having a great time. All right. So based off of, he's based just off of yesterday, just one chess match, it just made my mind really understand. And my goal here is just to give you guys a different way to think, because the emotional part, understanding 1 through 4 trades, is not that hard. It's the emotional part that kills us. It's the holding of the trades. It's all the stuff that you're taught not to do, but human nature wants you to do it. So I hope today I gave you guys a different way to look at things, just a little bit different, and I hope you implement it tomorrow. Any questions? All right, guys. Talk to everyone in the chat and happy trading.